Welcome and good afternoon to our viewers and to those who will be watching the recording. My name is Ben Walleroy. I'm from the South African Water Chamber, and on behalf of Brigitte, who's just changed her medication to try and get her voice back, she's battling. So I'll be standing in while she drives the show from backstage for us. Today we have a new guest, Professor Anja Du Plessis, and we have our usual anchors, Professor Anthony Turton, Professor Hamad Kassan, and Fred Platt. Can I see everybody in the studio? There we are. We've got everybody. Everybody's in a joyous mood because those of us who don't have Eskom power have solar power, wind power, generator power, and UPS power. So we're sort of a little bit more jovial than we were a couple of weeks ago. We're going to focus on the state of water and energy in our august nation at the moment, and also the solutions. And it's nice to see the next generation, if I may refer to you, Anja, as the next generation coming through. You'll see a few of us a few of them are a bit older than you and I, and taking the baton, from us. And we'll also touch on Anja's latest publication with Tony. But really, we're a solutions-focused organization, and what we'll do is do a very quick round robin for everybody just to introduce themselves in a quick 2-minute update of what they've been up to and what they think we're up to in the water sector. There's been a lot of media coverage over the last 2 weeks as systems tend to collapse, and I'm talking about the past, the power situation, but also what we'll then look at is what are the sort of solutions, and what we're not looking for here is political solution. That's not our job. Our job in the chamber and in academia and in the various service companies is actually to come up with technical and social solutions and how we can bridge them. And also, very importantly, it's the water energy nexus, so that everybody thinks water, energy, food, and the like. But let's just talk about the water energy nexus. The two are intertwined, and as we saw in the pandemic, things are so interlinked. It's crazy what the consequences are. Anja, welcome to our show. We promised to be civilized, because I think Tony was telling us how uncivilized we're becoming. I think he was talking about the country, not us, here on the panel. Welcome to the show, and a little bit of background about yourself and your state of the nation.
My state of the nation, hopefully less depressing. However, it's still depressing in the water sector currently. I'm a professor, associate professor at UNISA. I got my PhD at University of Johannesburg, specializing in water quality and then also the effects of land cover on hydrological systems. The thesis basically developed algorithms which could be used so that you can predict water quality with land cover change. That has led to obviously a couple of publications. I've worked with Tony as well on a couple of projects. An interesting one was the Atlas of Wastewater in Africa. And then obviously the most recent book I published was basically stating the state of fresh water in South Africa, the real reality, because at this point in time, politicians are telling all kinds of stories and saying that everything is fine. However, I decided to write this book and then also include examples, real world examples of our freshwater reality.
Thanks, Anja. Look, I forgot to mention this show is not for sensitive politicians or viewers. This is going to be fact, and we're sitting on a time bomb. It's a microbiological time bomb. And the average person in the street only realizes when they're sitting on the toilet for 3 days in a row, or their taps run dry, but or they swim in eThekwini, But it's yes. Not, it's actually not a joke. That's very interesting. Well, we'll get. Thanks for that intro. We'll get to some of the specifics of the book, and so not to tempt Tony to do that, we're going to jump across to Fred. Your turn, Fred. I think Hamant is struggling because he was being load shed and he had to go and switch his diesel generator on. He's one of the fortunate ones that has budget for well, maybe it's a petrol generator. Fred?
Yeah, thanks, Benoit, and nice to meet you, Anya. Wonderful to have you on the show. I think the reality of the matter is that for some time, we have foreseen the scenario which is now starting to unfold in the country. So I think the activism has been there for some time to say, listen, guys, water is critical to every aspect of life. And unless we start understanding and elevating that debate to become central to the national debate and growth, and understanding water as the ultimate economic enabler, we are going to be running into problems. And sadly, we're now at that inflection point where we're saying, we told you so, but it doesn't help to do that only. What is critical is for us as business to say, how do we take and continue to take leadership positions in terms of directing and getting an informed position, firstly, on where we are. And I think, just today I was speaking to someone and said, before you can move forward, the first thing we got to do is we got to put our hands up and say, this is where we are. We understand we're in a crisis. And I think that's starting to happen. The second thing is that we've got to start understanding that the problems or the solutions lie broadly in an engaged civil society and in business. And we got to stop looking at politicians for our solutions and saying they're going to magically come up and solve our problems, or the state for that matter. And that has huge implications and for where we are. But it also creates incredible opportunity to harness this crisis and to drive through opportunities which can address a lot of the national imperatives. And that is really where I think we as a business chamber are focused. And that is, we got a problem, we admit we need the facts, we need to put the facts on the table. And that's why it's so wonderful to have, with us, Anya, to do that. But on the other side of it is, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to take moral leadership? How are we going to drive this imperative? And how do we turn what is effectively a crisis into the opportunity of turning our country and the water issue around?
Thanks, Fred. Welcome to Mireille, who's watching us from Australia. So that's, I think, early evening or late Perth, so probably early evening or late evening. Tony, you've been quite busy in George, I see, and obviously we'll talk about the book with Anya, just now. But your take on the last 2 weeks that have been very busy. I think all of us have been quite busy in the media and the likes. Are we getting sufficient attention to wake up our society when it comes to our water challenges?
Yes, I think the last 2 weeks have certainly been very interesting for me professionally. So let me just give you a sort of brief overview of what's happened. I'll work from today backwards. Today I read a very interesting piece that was published in one of the Eastern Cape newspapers that was written by Dr. Mandy Ace, who's a colleague of mine, an extremely competent aquatic ecologist. And well, I tell you, she put that scalpel in today and she really, really wrote an amazing piece. And I suggest we consider getting her on the show sometime in the future because she's a highly credible aquatic ecologist. And what she's saying essentially is that society has been pushed too far and they're starting to push back. So that's the theme that I would like to use to summarize the last 2 weeks. Then I was invited by a large bank, Investec Bank, to engage with a whole lot of their professionals that they flew in from all over the world. They chose to fly them into George, and that gave me a very interesting opportunity to engage with an NGO at George that is mobilizing grassroots level to oppose the development of a housing estate right next to the George Dam, the only water supply for the city. And through that, I met some very interesting leaders. And in fact, in my professional opinion, I can safely say that I think George is probably one of the best managed municipalities that I am aware of. I haven't been to all municipalities, but certainly those that I am aware of, without any question about, George has benchmarked itself as the best. However, having said that, today I've heard that they've made an announcement that they are cutting off all forms of public participation in this proposed project of theirs. So in other words, they've suddenly come down quite authoritarian and totalitarian just at the very moment in time when they were starting to blossom, as this benchmark. So that's what happens in this society of ours. In a failing state, you get these different signals that come out at the same time. And of course, the other thing that happened is this week I've had engagement with two major financial institutions. One was Investec Bank, and another one was a very, very big fund manager, one of the biggest in South Africa. And it's interesting to know that the managers of capital, the managers of money, are starting to understand that the future of the economy lies in water. And what I explained to them was very simple: that water and money and water and capital actually perform very similarly. They both are both fluxes. They flow in time and space, and 1 unit of money and 1 unit of water can be utilized multiple times, and that's called a multiplier. And that's where the whoopee happens. That's where we got to go in the future. So they got that. And I can very proudly say that one of these really big fund managers, they manage retirement funds, etc., but very, very big ones, they starting to get it. And so that was pretty much a mixed bag this week. But then I'd also like to say that it's very, very nice for me personally, as a personal level, to be on the show with Anja Du Plessis today. I've come a long way with her from a graduate student. We've really done a lot of projects together. And it's a great pleasure to see her as a professor today. She certainly deserves that role. And she's always been, in my opinion, one of the most reliable go-to people that I've ever known. And that's why I've always included her in my project. So, Anja, thank you very much. This is your moment. We hand the baton over to you, and ultimately you're going to then start cultivating your own next sort of cohort of professionals. So to me, it speaks ultimately, the message here is about the continuity. And just in closing, I think the whole state of the nation that's coming down now, I think the state of the nation is going to be a very interesting one, because I believe society has been pushed to a point where they are actually really ready to bite back. Society is about to bite back. So I think this is where we're going. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Tony. And yes, it's good when we put the bare truth on the table. When you were talking about the money flows, investment, water, and all that, what popped in my mind was the tokenization of water. So the digital water sphere. And what we're starting to see, where there's a crisis, water gets tokenized. And what that does for our sector is revolutionizing it everywhere in the world. I'm not talking about water trading and Bitcoin. I'm talking about distributed ledger technology or blockchain. What's happening is it puts value to water. Once you put value to a commodity, the behavior changes completely, because society is driven by return on investment. And if the investment pillar is a token of water, now we're talking business. And the tokenization of water sorted out a lot of the issues in Australia during the millennium drought. Is busy being done, plus trading and all the like. When I say trading, private trading is being done, and where savings are being tokenized and all the likes. South Africa is doing it, just hasn't tokenized it officially, but I think we're not far off that. So that concept that investment funds, private equity, and the banks are starting to see value in water, I think is fundamental, because as humans we've been doing it for thousands of years, so probably 200,000 years. But since the times of the Romans, we've seen the value in water. And as you said a couple of weeks ago, we've started to become uncivilized, going back to the Middle Ages, where we don't value water. And what we then do is we start polluting it and all the likes. And we're going to turn it around. Hemant, is your link stable there? Have you managed to to get everything going on the generator. Are you ready to give us a quick snippet of the last couple of weeks?
So far, so good, yeah. So far, so good.
So good. You've gone to a water and electricity load shedding free zone. Tell us about it.
Well, yeah, I've been watching the media, and clearly, I know that Banoy has been extremely busy. So has Anthony, and so has our guest today, Professor Anja. I heard you the other day on radio. Yep, there's a lot of talk in this country, and clearly the issues of water surfacing is being very important now that we have a crisis on hand. It wasn't a very big topic in the days gone by. I can recall for 22 years I was responsible for the public health of 16 million people here, and I used to warn the leadership that don't take this matter for granted. It might cost you. At the time, it was costing us in the region of 1% of the total budget of the organization to assure the public health of 16 million. I don't think there's many places in the world that can do it at that price. And we did it. And our water, I heard a program the other day that Anja was talking to, in fact, where they were saying our water quality used to be one of the best in the world, right? And the journalist was saying, well, I can recall they used to say it was something like the 6th best in the world. When lo and behold, that's history now, because now I hear about cholera this week, and I'm like, what's going on here? The cholera is a waterborne disease. This is a disease that we can conquer. It was long conquered in many countries in the world. How is this emerging now all of a sudden? So yeah, it's interesting times. Great to see the great interest in water, but I'd still like to see a lot more action, I'd still like to see people saying, these are the 3 things we intend to do. I'm not hearing that part. I'm hearing a lot of classification of the problem, because as South Africans, we are traditionally good at defining and redefining the problem. But I'm not hearing about the 3 action steps that we're going to do in the next 3 months, so that we're all going to have some reprieve from either the water situation or the power situation. Because they're 2 sides of the same coin. But I had the privilege recently to go to Uganda a couple of weeks ago, on a project. And lo and behold, for 1 week, I didn't experience any load shedding. I thought it was unusual. Really, I thought something's wrong here. The water also kept coming out of the tap. Of course, I didn't drink it because, being an expert in the field, I know where to drink the water and where not to, so to say. But it was kind of odd. And then I was recently in Indonesia with the Gates Foundation, where we were reviewing the latest SAN standard on the non-sewage sanitation, which we wrote 5 years ago, which was the first standard we wrote before there was a product in the world. So this was really innovative thinking. So 5 years later, with the products out there and this great technology available to us, with fully recycled water toilets, which we're not using enough of in this country, despite having the solution, and actually we manufacture the technology in this country, if you really need to know, fully South African manufactured. Indonesia also, there was no load shedding. And then, I got back here and it was like, wow, we have retrogressed. We have, folks. And I don't think that, we ought to be very proud of that. This is the thing that I think none of us as experts around the table here ever expected or wanted to see in our life. And we are exactly where we didn't want to be. And I'm sure every one of us have told so many people over the last 10, 15, 20 years, you're going to get there if you don't change the path you're on. But that hasn't helped yet. So I'm looking for the eureka moment now. I'm looking for that moment where some leader is going to stand up in this country, and I'm actually hoping it's going to happen tonight, in some way, when the president is going to tell me the 3 things they're going to do so that we're going to have a better life in this country going forward. So welcome, Anja. Really delighted to have you, and looking forward to having you more often on the show and contributing to the subject and changing the mindset in this country as to what we ought to be doing and how we can keep business going, because business is finding it so difficult. You know, how do you run a business without water, without power, without knowing that your water is safe to drink, etc.? This is stuff that was never thought about. You know, people are the simple things like the power going off and all of your refrigerated food stuff is getting wasted. I mean, this might sound like a small matter, but you know, we have 35% unemployment in this country. We cannot afford to have this type of incidents going on an ongoing basis at that level. So, looking forward to some positive news tonight. If somebody knows something, please share it.
I might
Thanks,
share
Ahmad.
something.
We're not going to lie to you, though. There's no silver bullet. Where you know, Tony's precipice, I think we just slid downhill over 30 years. I don't think I know it. I feel it, and I smell it. I smell the floaters in the air, you know, and that's because the pump stations are filling up, and they've only got a couple of hours of retention time, so we're not getting the sewage out. Luckily, where I'm at in Gauteng, although we're watershedding, we don't have sewage overflowing yet. But the smells, and you know, it's in the air. But I think, you know, Anja, if I understood correctly, part of what you've been studying is the effect of human buildings, developments, and the likes, and we've seen a lot of it without any spatial planning, and what the effect is on our water resources. So in the Northern Cape, for example, a lot of the farmers are complaining that they're unable to export their crops to certain parts of the world, the EU being traditionally that, because of the high E. coli in the lower Orange River. And on top of that, they're being load shed. They've got failed crops and had floods early on this year. Is there too much human development? Is it too uncontrolled? Or is it a little bit of everything apart from, you know, Mireille is asking us what's the blockage? It's political. It's not technology, nothing like that. It's 100% political. But the thing is, until the politics change, what do we do? Because we as society, as business, as chambers and the likes, we will do like we do electricity. We'll decouple ourselves, you know, we'll decouple ourselves from the collapsing realities to try and get each part of our cities, suburbs, farming, carp and all the like, to try and get them, you know, going. We're fortunate that our dams are all full, except for the Nelson Mandela Bay area, but everything has been filled up very well. A few floods in the Eastern Cape. But tell us a little bit about, you know, about your book, and so just to share with the viewers, and I think it's available on, I think it was Amazon.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon. Not that one, Tony, the other one. But yes, the wastewater one is also a good.
The latest one.
The latest one. The latest one is called South Africa's Water Predicament, Freshwater's Unceasing Decline. The book starts off with like a global perspective of where the world is at this point in time. It also then evaluates integrated water resource management, which has been emphasized throughout the decades that we should implement, looking at the challenges, but then also the successes thereof. Most are calling for the abolishment of integrated water resource management because of the few success cases out there. Then it also looks at our water service provision, and you're completely right. It's not just the smell, but you can actually prove it with statistics that are available, where you can see that actually less percentage of the population has got accessible water or reliable water, or actually sanitation services. And we've got like numerous technologies which we can implement in these rural areas or vulnerable areas of which are having these major issues. However, that call is not actually listened to at this point in time, unfortunately. The book also makes use of various real-world examples, case studies, to show various readers that actually we do have a major issue. It's not just a problem anymore, it's now a crisis. I think the load shedding and the power blackouts are playing a exacerbating role as well. So now you're actually just seeing the complete collapse of some of the infrastructure, whereby eThekwini municipality is blaming the April 2022 floods. But the message that I have been given throughout the media is to say that yes, the April floods have had a major impact. However, eThekwini municipality has been sitting with major sewage issues for many, many decades. And then the recent interview Tony and I did for Power FM, it really does put down the ignorance at this point in time of the public out there, whereby the presenter said, oh, but seeing that they're trying to stop the sewage that is being pumped into the ocean now recently. And I said, no, that has actually been going on for the past 2 to 3 decades. So it just shows you that I understand that we want to have action, as well as, mobilize civil society. But before we can get there, we actually just have to share the facts in a digestible way, so that people can understand that they actually have a right to clean water, they have a right to a clean environment, which we are all struggling with, especially the people in the rural areas. But then at the end of the day, all of these trends and then the increasing examples of our water crises right across the country is basically due to past and current management practices, which are reactive or non-existing. It's also the thing of all talk, no action. So you're basically saying that you have a plan, but what is the plan now exactly? Once we ask for it, there's no deliverables and so on. If we look at the new water resource NWRS that was published last year, it's basically almost exactly the same as in 2017. However, it's worse, but it's the same goals, it's the same deliverables that they are repeating over and over and over again. And I've been contacted by so many international companies, but then also national companies within the country asking what can they do. They would really like to get involved. And that's why I contacted Tony and Benno to say to them, listen, I'd like to work with the chamber. I've made connections so that we can try and implement the solutions, because as you said, we can't wait for government anymore. They are on a different path. They've got different agendas. They're looking at the 2024 elections. So for us to try and intervene in this crisis, I think we should first start with water stewardship, where we try and, as I said, disseminate knowledge to the public all over South Africa, but then also address the facts that are now being used. I've been told that Joburg Water has now declared that they only waste 31% of the water, of the non-revenue water stat that they're giving is 31%. And I asked them, so how did you get to this figure? And they couldn't give me an answer. So that's just some of the examples that are in the book. And then obviously some of the load shedding effects as well, which is now combining and forming a perfect storm, especially here in Joburg. I've also recently heard that AMD, acid mine drainage, is starting to decant again at the Western Basin. The Eastern Basin was an issue last year, whereby the pump also broke. And then they apparently had to wait for a German company to give them parts for the pump. So it's almost the same as our driving license problem, where they had to ship the printer all the way back to Germany. So to say the least, we've got insufficient understanding, first of all, by the people that are actually tasked and mandated to manage this. We have obviously major persisting water governance and leadership issues. There's inadequate enforcement of our existing legislation, which has been saying that it's world-renowned water legislation. And some people say that they cannot understand how we as a country can sit in the problem that we are at this point in time. And that's unfortunately due to poor management and our under expenditure, as well as our unqualified audits, especially of local municipalities. So most of the municipalities are actually just dysfunctional now. Communities apparently are going to the municipalities now after they've heard our interviews on the media, various media platforms. And the local municipalities just act ignorant and say that, but it's not their problem. But then they can actually now, with the information that we are spreading, it's actually now empowering communities, and they are trying to get the stuff out there online, not just on Twitter, but all over the place. I give them the contact details of various journalists, so the journalists can also try and learn some things. But in terms of the lack of suitable capacity and then skilled individuals in municipalities, Tony touched on that on Wednesday in the Power FM interview as well, is that you're basically having cadre deployment of people that really do not have the sufficient skills or the knowledge to manage our water resources. Very good examples of this is in Nelson Mandela Bay, then also Gauteng province, and then the still continued sewage pollution that's happening in the Vaal River. Despite the efforts of the Save the Vaal community and civil action, and despite the Department of Water Affairs and Sanitation putting the municipality under administration, those people are still sitting in their chairs. They're still getting a salary at the end of the day. And no improvement has been made in the Vaal River. So this is where my opinion is that can we really expect a government that basically led us down this path to get us out of the sewage? I don't think that is a realistic plan. I also agree that we can't wait for government anymore. We have to stand together as civil society and professionals and get the message out there that, this is now, it's a health crisis is on the way. I've heard of the cholera cases in Joburg, but they are attributing that to Zimbabwe, because the two people are Zimbabwean citizens. So that's where the all talk and no action comes in. And then also just using, alternative facts, like President Trump usually said. But at this point in time, I think that if we fight these debates with facts and we put the stuff on the table, and you create awareness and water stewardships in the community so that we can start mobilizing, and then also try to get a way of trying to get in partnerships with these private companies. There is a company in the US, California. They have a patented product, which is an amazing thing. It basically uses wastewater. It treats it to distilled water. It then goes through another process where it then obviously divides the sewage and whatever. So it takes that through a process, and then it produces construction materials. And then after that, it creates obviously electricity through steam, through the turbine. And they've currently doing a pilot study somewhere in California. I'm speaking to the guy tomorrow. But they are very interested in coming to South Africa and to say that, listen, we have a consolidated, very simple product that we can implement, and it can serve over 3 million people. So it's much better than Gweri Mantashe's plan of these car power ships that he's now recommending. So my message at the end of the day is that water is a complex issue. We're staying in a country with poor water governance, and then also the collapse of our aged water infrastructure now. We're sitting with the sewage crisis. We're sitting with rivers not having buffering capacity left anymore. So pollution is going to become a huge issue already. It's already a huge issue, but I think it's going to get attention now from the public as well, especially when they see that the mud is coming out of the taps, which I've seen in Jacobsdal in the Free State. So in terms of going forward and actions that I think need to take place for us to try and better the situation, obviously, firstly, engagement with civil society, but then also we need an immense collaborative effort and work together with each other so that we can highlight these driving forces, the pressures, the challenges, and the consequences, but then also come up with interventions. And not just say that we can do A, B, and C, and D. We need to have a plan in place to say that this is what we're doing on the short term, medium, and long term. We prioritize these interventions. We sequence them in a logical and realistic manner. And then also call for effective long-term management. And I think the only way that we're going to get the management under control, or for it to be a little bit better, is to say to government that, we want to work with you. We have the skills and the expertise as well as the knowledge and whatever. It's not that we want to point the finger. We're now in a crisis, so we need to work together. Perhaps that will change their mindset. But as I said, I think they're focusing at this point in time on the elections in 2024. So my last message from the book is basically just to say that there are so many opportunities in terms of reuse of wastewater, in terms of using technology to fix all of the leaking pipes or bursting pipes. I think, Benno, you said that there is a technology, and I've seen it in the US, whereby you have an instrument that you put down the pipe and it fixes leaks. So it's not necessarily that you have to dig out the whole pipe and then fix it. There is technology out there where you can fix the pipe without huge manual labor. And then lastly, just for investment, public-private partnerships, and then collaborations. And that's also why I'm trying to listen to you guys as well, because I'm getting all of these proposals from companies within SA, but then internationally as well, asking, how can they help and how can we implement the technology here to try and assist with the water crisis.
Thank you, Anja. That's a good synopsis. Thank you very much. There's two things that stick out to me. Is one is, and we've spoken about on the shows, we have to depoliticize basic services, including water. So whether there's an election at local, provincial, or national, should not affect. The UK had 3 PMs last year. Now, whether you like the PMs, their politics, or whatever the case is, the water still flows. They've got a war with Russia. The energy still flows. Everybody said they would collapse. They did not collapse. My family and all that, they're not cold. And people have, prices are being capped. There's no food shortage or all the like. So we have to depoliticize. And it's quite difficult because South Africa hasn't understood, I believe, the fundamental problems. We don't understand democracy and capitalism. We understand cronyism and theft. And what's in it for me and for my direct, cadres around me. So how do we depoliticize it? And I think it's, with water, it's a lot more difficult than energy. Decoupling ourselves from the national grid in energy is relatively easy. Doing it in water, where, the sun hasn't been nationalized by the South African government yet. I don't say they won't try it, but it hasn't been nationalized yet. But water is a national resource, like it is in most countries. The problem is, we have all of these policies worked with in the chamber, from the master plan in 2018 to the NIT 2050, phase 2, the national water security and the NDP and all the likes. So national government has done the frameworks in it, but the actions at local government, most of it, and Zippo is happening because it is highly, highly politicized, and that's where the GDP is generated and the like. So, and you mentioned a lot of technologies available and all this. We know that South Africa is actually one of the incubators in the world for the last 50 years to 75 years of water-based technology. Forget that we've got billionaires in the US, of which there's over a dozen who are the heads of the top universities, space programs and all the likes, who left the country because the environment here is not conducive for their entrepreneurship. Now, can you imagine if you had a drop of the American dream in South Africa? We wouldn't be having this discussion. We wouldn't need to have this discussion. So we need to depoliticize it. I do not know what the answer is, but what I do know, you mentioned the Valsa and Fuleni. What I do know is the salaries were not paid of the officials last month. So now they're choking on their own turds floating in the Val. They did not get paid. Today a notice was sent out in Fuleni. They cannot collect the waste, because all their compactors were taken, were repossessed by Eskom and their bank accounts and all the likes. So you've got 800,000 people who don't have water, sewage in their front and backyards, in the streets. You have big industry there that just can't operate. Now the waste can't be taken away. And the notice municipality says, use adjoining municipal systems, which is really not going to happen. What I did hear last week is also that, and this is the problem we have when we've got unregulated water activities off grid. And the term used was mining of sewage. And let me tell you, so I spoke about tokenization. I never thought, we can mine landfills. I never thought we would be mining sewage. And that's so what's happening in eThekwini, a lot of the sewage, and eThekwini's got 600, 700, 800 megaliters a day of sewage, a lot of the sewage is not getting to the sewage plants, partially because of the pump stations that aren't working, but also because communities have taken the law in their own hand and are mining it. Now, I guess, what they're doing is they're taking it to, in actual fact, irrigate crops, okay, and cultivate crops and the likes. The health bomb that's being grown in the ground there is going to explode in those communities because, you know, there's nothing wrong with mining and reusing sewage, but you've got to do it in a regulated, professional manner. But, you know, in the absence of law and order and of the municipal officials, what's happening is the guys are taking advantage. Now, it is entrepreneurial, but now can you imagine if the pump station did work and if part of that sewage was disseminated into, Antonio will love this, but into a constructed wetland of sorts, if there's space, because there must be space if they're doing agriculture. And what happens is the community is then employed to make sure that that pump station, that pump station is not vandalized, secondly, that is maintained as part of their toll, and they take also a part of it to irrigate and the likes, but through constructed wetland. So you've got passive treatment, and that can then be reused and all the likes for various crops. So in a controlled and regulated manner. So what we're seeing at the moment is, because society is in the corner, it's starting to do things in a dangerous, unregulated manner. And so we don't want to stifle entrepreneurship, but it's got to be within the bounds of the law and of health rules, you know, and all the likes. So Fred, you were in the discussion, and I thought it was both good and bad. And you know, I sort of laughed at myself because us South Africans, we are very good entrepreneurs. You know, we can do that. But can you imagine if everybody started farming with sewage in their backyards and on islands in the streets and all the likes? I mean, the Pretoria cops wouldn't be able to keep up. You know, they tried to shut down guys growing vegetables on the curb. So you know, we've got a parallel economy developing because of the of the dire situation. I mean, Hemant, from your side, I mean, from a health perspective, irrigating crops with pure untreated sewage must be one of the worst ways of killing yourself slowly, surely.
Look, you know, you don't have to have a PhD to know that you just don't do that. All right. In fact, you know, Tanya was talking about the USA. On the west coast of the US, they have now, actually, they have put in new legislation banning the use of wastewater sludges for use of fertilizer and irrigation, etc. So hence, you're getting a whole set of new technologies emerging, which can now treat these sludges in order to produce power, in order to beneficiate, water, and all of that. So what I'd like to do very quickly is, I saw that there was a question up there, and I think that there's a lady who's asking, so what's the main issue in South Africa? The technology is available, and there are experts all over the place in South Africa. Where is the blockage? Well, you know, let's not just take South Africa, but this is the same problem that you find in the developing world. Africa, Asia, parts of Asia, and Latin America. Now, I've spent my entire career of 30, 35 years working in these regions, because this notion of almost 3 billion people not having access to water and 4 billion people not having access to sanitation has been my preoccupation all my career. And the main areas in the world that don't have that is Africa, parts of Asia, and Latin America. So let me try to answer the question, where's the blockage? The studies have been done, folks. We know exactly what the challenges are. And the challenges are the following. Political will is number one. Any country, any municipality, any entity that has the political will to do something will accomplish it. The world has demonstrated that. We don't need to research this stuff. Number two, governance. The fish rots from the head. Simple, that's the way the cookie crumbles. You don't have effective governance, you start having corruption, you start having all of these things going on, right? And the third issue is leadership. You don't have leadership, you can't move forward, you don't have a vision. And then it's followed by management. It's followed by skills that Anja talked about. It's followed. Money is last. In my opinion, as an expert, as a global expert in this sector, you don't need to have money. I can demonstrate to you cases in the world where all the other ingredients were lined up and they didn't have the money. And the money came to them because people can see that the other ingredients are lined up. In South Africa, we take the notion that, oh, we need so many billions in order to solve this problem. Every time we have a problem of one sort or another, I see an amazing ability to quote and quantify how much of money we need to solve a problem. You can throw money and not have those other 5 ingredients in place. You know, in my view, you're going nowhere in a hurry. Absolutely nowhere in a hurry. So herein lies the quagmire, right? Let's get the political world right. We are a business chamber. We have expertise. Yes, we're ready to sit at the table. Yes, let's do exactly what Anja was saying. Let's figure out what are the 3 to 5 things to do. Let's do them. Because, you know, success breeds success. If you do 3 things that you promised to do, you feel good, you can do another 3 things. Unfortunately, in South Africa, we promise to do 10 things. We don't achieve 0. So we can't have this kind of mindset in the country that is making so many people angry. South Africa is becoming a country of angry people. That's not normal. That should not be the case. So I'd like to stop there and hopefully I've answered the lady's question, which she was kind enough to put onto the chat. And then,
Thanks,
Tanya, looking forward to working with you on the technology front. All these technologies, we have the solutions. No shortage. In fact, you know, I'm known to say at the biggest events in the world, in the water and sanitation sector, you are not short of technology whatsoever. We've got lots of it.
I
Absolutely.
agree totally with you. I agree totally with you. The issue, as you say, is basically political will. You're talking to a brick wall at the end of the day. And we have the skills, we have the capacity, we've got all of those things. However, if there's no political will, then, you know, it gets stopped. But we need to try and find a way to get around that, because if we are going to be on this current path, it's not going to be a very good one. There needs to be some kind of way that you can bypass the political will without stepping on toes.
Therein lies the conundrum. Tony, you wanted to say something in this vein.
Yes, I just wanted to add on to what Hamant is saying there. We need look no further than Mfuleni. Mfuleni used to be the epicenter of heavy engineering in Africa. It was probably the industrial heartland of the entire African continent, where primary products were produced. We produce steel from iron ore and coal. We produce copper cables from raw materials. We did all kinds of amazing things. Produced specialized steels that were used in all kinds of sophisticated engineering applications. And today it is broken. It is so broken. There's raw sewage running everywhere. The municipality has been unable to self-correct. And in fact, the last I looked, I think something like 3 billion rand has been spent there. They just talk in units of R1 billion. And the first R1 billion, they just threw at the problem. All they said, we need more money. They gave them R1 billion, nothing happened. Then they appointed the army. They appointed the South African National Defence Force. Benoit and myself were appointed to part of that task team. We were one of 3 or 4 technical people in the military task team. We were both asked whether we would join the military, and we both said we would. And we had to go and get our police clearance certificates to show that we weren't criminals, etc. I don't know about you, Benoit, but I'm still waiting for my papers to come in the post. They haven't come, even though, despite our willingness, because they asked us. The general asked us. We didn't ask him. The general said, "Will you join him?" Yes, by all means. Where do we sign? Okay, so that's another R1 billion later, and then Erwat, Eastern Watercare Company, was appointed, and that's another ran down the tubes, and nobody has ever done a basic assessment of the root cause analysis. What problem are we trying to fix? What is it that we are actually trying to fix? And the reason why we can just throw money at it, because that's the problem in South Africa. In South Africa, we've got the bottom feeders that just want the money. The more money that's flung around, the more the trough feeders can sink their snouts into. And I'm afraid that's the problem. We've got to overcome that, and that's really the politics of the situation. So I'll just close by saying there's no shortage of technology, and there's no shortage of capital. There is an absolute shortage of bankable projects that are well governed, projects where there's no theft, projects where things are ring-fenced, where there's accountable leadership. We don't have any of those things. But capital and technology, take your pick.
Agreed. Thanks, Tony. Fred, from your side, to me, the only solution, and I think it's become clear over the years, because we've done everything we can at national government level, how do we depoliticize specifically the water and sanitation non-delivery of services? So how do we depoliticize it? Because if we don't decouple it from politics, we carry on polluting ourselves to death. So and I use the word suicide because it should maybe wake up. We are committing suicide as a nation. We're a nation of lemmings. And the thing is, the lemmings probably knew it. We don't. And yes, through the media we can get, and through these shows we get a lot of exposure and try and educate society who's normally not worried about these things because they work. But how do you think, and maybe I'm putting you on the spot because I think it's a very difficult thing, but I think our clear priority is we have to depoliticize water-related services. But have you got any ideas as we close off on how to embark on that?
Yeah, thanks, Bema. I think listening, and I think we all know, and we have analyzed the problem to death. We know exactly what the problem is. We know where, how, but our problem really lies in the implementation. And how do we take it forward? And for me, there's two issues that need to be addressed there. But just the one thing I think you've got to understand is not, I worked for a company years ago where my CEO used to tell me every company is perfectly set up to get the results that it gets. So the fact that you have inaction or the fact that you don't have the correct systems doesn't stop things from happening. So you effectively driving a certain behavior because the system is set up to drive towards that outcome. And it's perfectly, so where we are, we're perfectly set up to get the results that we get, which means that we see the destruction and the lack of things happening because what we are doing is we're feeding a chaos economy and we are actually privatizing at an incredible rate into this chaos. So, and the easiest way to say is because we don't have an effective railroad, we now have 1,000 or 1,000,000 trucks driving on our roads, destroying our trucks and taking the coal and moving it around where government has no control. So we're privatizing without any form of boundaries, without a plan, without moving. And that same thing happens because we have a way in which the people that have will always start contracting out, whether it's security or healthcare or education or whatever the case may be. So we need to the important thing is we need to provide capacity within the institution. And how do we do that when there's a massive governance failure and when there's a lack of trust and where communities are losing faith in the institutions? And effectively, the problem that we have is we're dealing with humans and people are in a position now where they're saying, look, we just don't trust. We just don't trust. We don't believe what a politician says to us. We don't believe another plan. We don't believe another document. We won't put our money in. We won't do this and that. And if you're on that trajectory, it ultimately will drive to chaos. So for me, we need to create a governance framework where everybody can buy in. And for me, Benoit, the only way you're going to do that at this point in time is to use the available technologies to create the frameworks and the governance where all the parties can buy in. And we need a social compact where the people sit around and understand. The issues like water and energy are not political footballs. No political party will survive at the end of the day unless we address it. So we need mature leadership, and I think Hemant has spoken about it, and you know, we need to get to a situation where it doesn't matter what color your T-shirt is and who, whatever. It's not it's not an issue that you're campaigning around. It's an issue of national imperative, and we need to get everybody around the table to say, this is how we're going to address this problem. And then we can fight a little bit later. But for me, just to answer your question simply, we need to apply the proper technology in order to create a governance framework where we can have a social compact on which we can roll out the multitude of available technologies and finance and capital that is available.
Thanks, Fred. So we know what you're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks with our support. Thanks a lot. Agree 100%. And in closing, Anja, apart from thinking that we're all nice people here, putting all the facts on the table and the likes, what would you like to say in closing to our audience?
I would just like to say to Fred, first of all, you're talking about a framework. I actually do recommend that in the book, to say that we need a practical and realistic program, whereby you draft it and you develop it and you get buy-in from the various sectors. And that's, like you said, that's exactly what we need. And then I also recommend certain aspects that obviously this program needs to look at: improved planning, integration of water resource planning and development, improvement of local government, develop and manage water infrastructure, and then obviously water management programs. That's one of the things. We've got catchment management agencies that's been established since 2009, 2007, and only 2 are functional. And I see that they now want to combine the Orange and the Vaal into one in the new National Resource Water Strategy. So, but my conclusion, or my last word to the viewers out there, would be that we are able, we are willing, and we will find a way to try and establish a framework and a program that we can take to the parties or the main role players, and try to make improvements one step at a time. At this point, it's not going to happen overnight. As Benno said, there's no silver bullet. Unfortunately, we're sitting with 3 decades of problems now actually just collapsing. So I would think that at the end of the day, just to try and collaborate with each other and to get the message through, and to, if government doesn't want to come to the party, we need to find another way.
Thank you, Anja. Really like this word framework. So we're going to frame it now. And that's really, I think, going to be our mission as we go forward, as a chamber, to try and address the depoliticization of the water sector in collaboration with government and other stakeholders, and specifically the local government, so through SAWC and the likes, that we can keep these services going for all of our benefit and to attract the FDI that we need and all the likes, irrespective of the political cycles that we're in. And we've got 2 political cycles. We've got national and provincial, and then we've got the local government one. So we are, every 2 years or so, we are in a political excuse story, and we just can't afford that. We need to get past that. And I think if we can achieve that framework in the next quarter or 2, the dialogue, and we do have some avenues to do that. There are panic stations in some of these where big business at the moment is trying to keep the food chain going. It's collapsing, and it's collapsed not principally because of water yet. It's collapsing because of cold chain and irrigation issues, because of inadequate electricity with some of the very, very big farmers. And we're going, just to remind everybody, we are probably going into a cycle of 6 to 8 years of droughts now. So the assimilation of buffering capacity of our water resources it's at its limit, as Anja says. It's going to be seriously over its limit now. Plus, it's going to be less waters, apart from being polluted, all the like. So we're going to be we've got a nice insurance policy for the next year, but after that, it's going to be very, very tough. So we can't waste any more time. We need to have this framework to depoliticize our water services for everybody's benefit. I want to thank you all, our panelists, and specifically to Anja. We hope to see you quite a few times here, and also look forward to working with you within the chamber. Our website is busy being redone. The platform was stopped last year by the service provider, but we are busy working on having that redone. So hopefully that will be up soon. It's not a good thing. We're struggling on that, and I think we'll regather in 2 weeks' time. And I think there are some suggestions. What we'll do, we'll publish them, on social media. Thank you on social media. I think specifically it's been Facebook and LinkedIn. We'll see a lot from the other platforms and YouTube and the likes as the recordings go around. Thank you, for joining us. And yes, this is not a Sona address here. This is not a talk shop here. This is an action shop here. So that's what we're going to do. Thank you very much.